Good afternoon to everyone and welcome to the first Mediterranean cruise industry Medatalk. I am Caterina Passariello and I welcome you all to this panel and I will be with you through all the afternoon. I would like first of all to thank the ASCAMI organization for this opportunity and also to all the speakers and participants that are connected now with us. Just a few words to present myself. I came from the consultancy and training sector. I work in the internationalization field, and I am also the head of Institute of the MACTT, an higher educational institute licensed in Malta that do training for adults in the technology, trade, and culture sector. I am also the president of the Canadian Chamber in Italy, a no-profit association that supports Canadian companies that would like to invest in Italy and in Europe. Now let's start directly with the forum of this afternoon, and let's start to speak about the cruise industry. It is one of the main sectors in the tourism sector, both at international level, but also regarding the Mediterranean area. In the Mediterranean region, the Mediterranean region is one of the main for the cruise sector because it offers a lot of products and services to the tourists, thanks also to the countries and the communities and cultures that are in the area. The Mediterranean area, in fact, is the second one globally after the Caribbean for the cruise sectors, and it brings together 150 harbour ports and 70 operators, with Barcelona the main hub for the southern and eastern harbour for cruise and itineraries. The cruise industry is growing a lot, with 20.5% of growing the tourism sector in the last 5 years. But unfortunately, the COVID situation doesn't help it. In fact, the tourism sector is one of the main affected by the pandemic. And this afternoon, together with keynote speakers from different countries of the Mediterranean area, we will see together their point of view regarding the actual situation. Let's start with the first panelist. So I will invite Ms. Figen Ayan, President of MedCruise. She, since February 2014, serves as the Chief Port Officer at Galaport Istanbul. She started her professional life in the cruise industry in 1994 with the International Travel Services Company and continued her tourism career in 1999 with Tura Tourism. She acted as the Marketing and Communications Manager of Global Investment Holdings until 2005, and after as the Marketing Director of Kudasi, Bodrum and Antalya Cruise Ports. Thank you, Ms. Ayan, for your participation. You can activate your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for ASCAME for inviting MedCruise Association to this valuable event, and to all the panelists. I have a short presentation so that you can understand better what MedCruise is all about. So I'm just going to, I hope that everybody can see my screen.
Yes, I confirm you.
Perfect. So basically, our association was founded in '96, and we're representing 3 continents and over 140 ports within 21 countries. I like very much this map because it's just showing how important our association is to shape the industry and to be a kind of bridge between the cruise lines, but also the cruise ports, which are the destination and the key player for the success of a cruise company. And when we're looking at how MedCruise was evolved, we can see that there were about 12 port members, and with a 6-fold development. Right now, we have 74.
Sorry, Ms. Ayan, if I interrupt you. Can you,
sure.
Yes, can you share the full screen of the presentation, please?
Here we go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katerina. So basically, we're talking about a six-fold increase within 25 years, and we are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. When we're looking, and you mentioned the COVID situation, the cruise industry is a flourishing industry, no matter what crisis has happened. But the pandemic had a very big hit on our situation. And we can say that the peak period was really April for our industry. And as you can see from this graph, there was a drastic decrease in the passenger flow, but we recovered really quickly by taking the necessary precaution, not only on board the cruise ships, but also from the port side as well, so that we could just welcome the passengers in new environment. So when we're looking at the cruise passenger movement between 15 and 19, you can see the positive increase every single year, as I've mentioned over the years. And when we're comparing 2019 to 2020, we can say that we had a minus 90% of decrease in our cruise calls. So from 13 over about 15,000 cruise calls per year, this number diminished to about a little over 1,000 calls per year. And when we're looking at the numbers, you can see the very same two-digit decrease, around 95% in the passenger movement. Same goes for the transit or the home port activities. So these are the calls of per quarter. You can see that we have picked up our activities in the first quarter drastically with 87%. So which is just showing how resilient and robust the cruise industry is. And when we're looking at the development by region, we can say that the West Med, where actually our friends in Barcelona are located, has been actually the located port and region which took back and picked up its cruise activities, followed up by the Eastern Med and then the Adriatic. What we can see here is that the most affected area has been the Black Sea, and we will see later on that actually Med Cruise Association has done a lot to revive the Black Sea and also the Eastern Med. When we're looking at the cruise industry risk tracking, we can say that right now we have among 450 cruise ships in the market, 230 are back on track. And you can see with this traffic that it's picking up, it's coming back, and there are 64 brands sailing in the seas, so which is a good feedback for 2022. And when we're looking at the activities as of this month, they are in the Mediterranean, in our region, as Med Cruise ports. We can say that among the 230 cruise ships, about 140 of them, so the majority, are located in the Mediterranean, which is proving that one more time, the Mediterranean is key for the restart of the cruise industry post-pandemic period. So when we're looking at these ships, we have to mark up that these ships are here for layups as well. And we have been, as port authorities, strong allies for the cruise industry so that they could have homes for their cruise ships. So this is key also to understand that maybe there were no passenger activity, but that the ships had safe harbors to lay in our ports, whether it was in Italy, in France, or in Greece, in our Greek-French ports. So when we're looking at 2021 and looking at the capacity, I was curious to know, yes, we have started back the activities, but what is the capacity of the sailing? And we can say that Carnival fleet is active by 65% right now. They are not in full capacity yet, but we're talking about 60% capacity sailing for some cruise lines. Some are for 50% or some 70%. But this is all positive developments for all of us, basically. They are not by 10 or 20%. It's just showing that actually the cruise passengers have still an appetite to cruise, no matter what happens around the globe. And I would like to show on this map the region the cruise lines have started, the companies who have just put their ship, and I would like to send a warm thank you to all these cruise companies who trust in our services and trust in the precautions and the contingency plans that we have put in place in a very short period of time, and which helped actually for our cruise passenger and crew to sail again. So MedCruise is not only the leading cruise association representing cruise ports and destination, it's also a very proactive association. And I would like to briefly tell you in one slide to summarize all the activities that we have done during the pandemic, during about 2 years. First of all, we have created a committee of experts to have the contribution of strong association to understand how to handle the pandemic. And we have also had CLEA Europe along with us to create some health policy. And we created also some virtual morning coffees, which were light gatherings to come with the cruise lines, to come with the ports as well, so that we can communicate and keep our dialogue alive. We had also dedicated COVID-19 sections on our website, same as the World Health Organization. We took it really seriously, and we made sure that the cruise lines and the other ports knew what was going around the globe, because actually we have to understand that some of our as members are not EU. So to get data, for instance, from Turkey, where I am from, it might have been difficult, but on a regular basis, immediately the cruise lines and also the whole association knew the number of cases, what was going on in my country as well. And we have actually signed some MOUs as well with key association to have collaboration between the ports, but also as an extension to the cities. And of course, the professional development course I was at the head of when I was the board member has been also a very good ally to get through this stormy weather. Also, the association has been more than a wining, dining, or gathering area. I am proud to say that along with actually our previous president, Mr. Aris Patsouli, we had the ability to open up the borders between Turkey and Greece and to start back the sailing from the 1st of October. We got the support of cruise lines to provide supporting letters and to do a kind of lobbying to the Ministry of Tourism in Greece, the Ministry of Shipping, but also the Ministry of Health, so that we could open up our borders. EU Healthy Getaways has been key here as well with Professor Hatzopoulos and Ms. Barbara as well. And we created actually some joint actions so that actually they could say that the Port of Kuşadası and Istanbul Port were aligned with EU procedures in terms of health procedures. And of course, last but not least, we have also co-signed with CLEA Europe a letter to be sent to the ministers in Greece. And thanks to all these initiatives, we had actually MedCruise to open up the borders between Turkey and Greece. We have the guidance of EU Healthy Gateways to have a joint action and guide through our ports. And we have also EMSA, ECDC, COVID-19 guidances as well to get through these tough days as well. And so basically we had a key role, we were a key role player in challenging time by staying in close contact with cruise lines, by actually managing our connection with the ports. And we had simple and detailed information to cruise guests as well, and to be on the same standards. And also we had been in communication with locals and tourist destinations as well. So, and we continue to be a guidance for all our members and associate members as well. So what is next? When we're looking ahead, we realize from all our discussion that actually COVID-19 might be evolve and be another type of pandemic as well. And in collaboration with EU Healthy Gateways, what we want to create is a map which would be actually a kind of safe bubble for all the cruise lines. So when the cruise lines will be doing their itineraries in the future, the members of MedCruise would be able to give the capacity in terms of cruise ship, in terms of terminal building and the volumes, but also in terms of, in case of emergency, the capacity of the hospitals, which might not be the same in a boutique port or a marquee destination like Istanbul or Barcelona or Piraeus. So they will be able to create their itineraries based on these data and have a direct access on a map. So this is really important for us to be a sustainable association, but also an association which is moving with actually the challenges that we are facing over the years. I would like to thank you very much for your time, and I am totally open for all your questions, and I wish all the best to all the panelists, and really happy to be with all of you today.
Thank you a lot, Ms. Ayan, for this presentation of the work done by MedCruise. And now I invite on the floor Mr. Pino Mussolino, President of the Port Authority of Central North Tyrrhenian Sea Ports of Rome. He graduated in law at the University of Bologna and completed an LLM in International Commercial and Maritime Law at the University of Wales. Since 2016 to 2020, was president of the North Adriatic Seaport Authority. Until March 2017, he worked in different positions across the shipping world. Thanks, Mr. Mussolino. You can start your presentation. Please activate your microphone. Thank you.
Hear me, everybody?
Yes, right. Yes, it's okay.
Thank you so much for having me here today. And I don't have a proper presentation with slides, but I will talk about where we are now, how we did end up where we are and where we are heading, not just because I am at the moment chairing the largest Italian destination, but I had an opportunity in my life to chair the Port of Venice, which was a huge cruise port in Italy. And so I had to face two different waves of COVID, so-called. The first one in Venice in 2020, and the second one in Civitavecchia in 2021. And to be even more precise, on when the whole first wave was hitting us in 2020, the Port of Venice was the first port in the world outside China to enter into a lockdown situation. So we had no points of reference, no idea of what was going on. And we had to deal with this situation, literally sailing in uncharted waters. Quite properly, the president of MedCruise has described the situation and the capacity that the market had in reacting, but very few people are underlying the fact that 17 or 18 months ago, we had no idea whatsoever what we were facing and how to face that. And the fact that, and I'm very proud of saying this, and let me do a little bit of marketing personally, but not just personally, we managed to restart cruising in Civitavecchia full time already 31st of January 2021, in the middle of the second wave, where the campaign of vaccination was yet to be started. So literally, we had the capacity in a few months to, stand up and outline with a very strong public-private cooperation guidelines and operational guidelines and practical guidelines and so on and so forth that has allowed us to restart safely and firmly with the cruising industry in one of the major Mediterranean ports. And I would like to give you a couple of figures because, normally figures are speaking up better than just mere words. We are heading by the end of 2021 towards probably more than 500,000 of passengers handled in 2021, which of course is a figure far away from what was our normal standard pre-COVID, but it will be probably the largest amount of cruise passengers handled by a single port in the world in 2021. So that is representing how important it was to give a firm evidence that cruise industry could restart even in the middle of the second wave. And that was not possible without the full commitment and full cooperation of all the players involved. The ship, and of course the lines, the ship owners, the terminal operators, public bodies, including the healthcare, local and national authorities, and so on and so forth, because we have managed to sort of like explain to our legislators and the regulators that it was about giving the idea that the cruise industry could restart safely, even in the middle of COVID. So important. You all remember what was happening in Yokohama last year at the outbreak of COVID. The cruise industry was sort of like the epitome of all the things that were going wrong. 79 casualties, if I remember well, on board of the cruise vessel. So it was the image that could have killed an industry for good. And that's why we were committed so much into restarting no matter what, and in making that restart a positive example for any other port involved in the cruise worldwide. And during this period, we have exchanged quite a lot of information with colleagues and other port managers so that we could present what were the results and what were the good practices, the best practices that we were developing. Because the main issue wasn't to set up a personal record, was to share and help the whole industry stand up. Plus, it is very important to underline that the cruise industry, it's not just about tourism and leisure. It's about industrial production. And, Italy is one, with Fincantieri, is one of the largest producer, maker of these high-end vessels. So the cruise industry does not involve only the leisure business. It's representing a long and articulated global value chain, that has a significant impact on different markets, and will play a significant role in the restart of the European economy overall, not just related to the tourism industry. And in doing so, it's representing a potential strong leverage to guarantee that all the markets and all the professionality can be developed. There's another point that I'd like to stress out, that through the cruise industry, we can form new professionals across the whole shipping spectrum. As you were reading my former experiences, I was also in shipping claims, and there's so much more around the shipping industry and the cruise industry than the surface that is represented, of course, by the touristic part of the business. And we should talk about this more and more. Why? Because I have the feeling that very often the cruise industry is kind of like, smaller brother in a table where other brothers are allowed to eat and speak, so to say. For example, with a European institution, there is much more latitude when you speak about containers or cargo in general than when you speak about cruises. And this is very limited and narrow-minded way of thinking, because, as I said, the cruise industry indeed represents a huge contributor to the wealth and the health of ports. I'll give an example. When in 2020 we lost 99.7% of the whole cruises. 99.7. I'd like to repeat that because it's a shocking figure. And nevertheless, we managed to keep and maintain the whole port alive with a lot of sacrifices, but we have been burned because through the wealth that we are creating thanks to the cruises, we can finance also the infrastructuring and the developing of the other parts of the port. And also this is something that very rarely is stressed out, how important it is to have a wealthy and healthy cruise port for the whole port and all the infrastructuring and master planning connected to it. So it is, and it was very important for the industry to restart, to prove that in 2020 and 2021, we were hit, but not defeated. And we have done what we could as a port of Civitavecchia and before when I was in Venice to show that this market particularly is a very resilient one and is one that will not go away in silence, so to say. And again, the cooperation that we managed to bring up all along the Mediterranean has also proved that we are not just competing, but we are co-operating when it's necessary, and when we had to do that, we cooperated. And then, of course, when the conditions for a common level playing field will be there again, we will compete, but always fairly, because in a moment of dire need, we were there together, we have suffered together, we have learned together, and we are now restarting to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mussolino, for your point of view. That was very interesting. And now I will invite on the floor Ms. Perez, Head of Cruises, Barcelona Port. She has worked in the port of our Barcelona Cruise Department since March 2009, responsible for relations with cruise lines, ship agents, and port cruise terminal managers. She first joined the Port Authority in 1998, working initially in the public relations, marketing, and commercial departments. Before that, she holds a degree in art history and a master degree in marketing from the University of Barcelona. Thank you, Ms. Perez, for your participation at this panel. Please, if you can activate. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation. To start talking about the main consequences of the impact of the COVID-19 in the cruise sector, I think that it's necessary to evaluate the situation we have lived during this terrible year and a half. A royal decree entered into force in Spain on 12 May 2020, banning the entrance of the cruise vessels at all the Spanish ports as a measure of protection considering the pandemic. At that moment, started a very, very difficult situation for the cruise companies, for the crew, we just remember them, and for all the Spanish ports, with thousands of flights canceled, international borders closed, and a lot of difficulties to travel back home for a lot of people. In April, a lot of cruise ships were canceled and in quarantine. At that moment, the cruise companies, the ports, the entities, and the politic bodies started to work in protocols to achieve the resumption. On June 26, the Port of Barcelona received the first international cruise vessel post-pandemic. You can imagine that it was an extremely emotional moment for the whole cruise community of Barcelona. Considering this evolution, you can imagine all the challenges the whole cruise community faced. To achieve the robust and very demanding protocols we have were extremely complicated for an industry that has been obvious for experience, not very well known by several public entities and regulators. Regarding the ports, they need to combine the protocols of their own country with the protocols done by the cruise lines. This fact produced a new stressing situation we could not imagine some months ago. High demand of space for testing, for instance. Talking with colleagues of other ports in the Med, this was a real challenge for all of us. Now we all are facing the next season, wondering if the protocols are going to be relaxed and if the rules are going to change, an essential fact to achieve the success during the next season. I can tell you that at the Port of Barcelona, we are going to close the current season welcoming almost 500,000 passengers. But the forecast for next year is about 800 calls and more than 3 million passengers. Obviously, this cannot be achieved by testing all the passengers before embarking. But on the other hand, I think that these are encouraging news. The demand of cruising remains strong. We have had the experience. All the companies calling at the Port of Barcelona have been increasing the number of passengers in the successive calls. We have said so many times that the cruise industry is a resilient one, and I think that this is a very good example of that. In fact, the confidence of the international passengers is increasing as they see cruises as one of the safest holiday choices. It is curious to think, for example, that most of the cruise lines requires that every single person on the ship, both crew and pax, be fully vaccinated for COVID-19, while in some countries like USA, the ratio of population fully vaccinated is about the 58% according to the CDC. So the vaccination is a key point in this sector. Has been a challenge for the crew. Remember that almost 250,000 persons works on board the global fleet of cruise ships, and that unfortunately, a lot of countries in the world do not have access to the vaccines. In Spain, more than 70% of the inhabitants are fully vaccinated. So we face a challenging season that will be an inflection point. We are at the path of the total recovery of the cruise sector. In fact, CLEA projects nearly 100% of global capacity to be back in operation by mid-2022. But right now, I would like to talk about another key factor for the present and future of the cruise industry. It would be the social, environmental, and economic sustainability. The COVID-19 has shown us in the starkest form the reality of our world. First, no need to be said, that has been a terrible earthquake for the economy. The University of Barcelona published in 2014 a study regarding the economic impact of cruises in Catalonia and in particular in the city of Barcelona. Let me explain you some figures. More than 1,000 million euros of annual billing in Catalonia and more than 9,000 full-time jobs. Not bad. Amongst these benefits, we should mention also that the cruise industry benefits sectors linked to tourism and other industrial and service sector, and provides flight connectivity to the Barcelona airport. But we should improve day by day. The European Union is launching several regulations regarding the environmental sustainability. The objective should be to reach zero emissions. The cruise companies and the ports have been working for years in this subject, as there is not a unique solution, and we shall follow an evolution. The Port of Barcelona is working currently in an ambitious plan to apply OPS in the whole port, not only for the cruise vessels, but also for the container vessels and ferries. But it's essential the commitment to this project of the cruise lines. Ports are going to invest a great quantity of money and efforts and need the response from the cruise lines. 2030 will be the deadline to accomplish the objective. Besides this project, the renewable energy is another key point in order to achieve zero emissions for the Port of Barcelona. To finish this presentation, I would like to share an optimistic message. As has been said, we have lived an unprecedented health crisis that showed us hard lessons. The cruise industry is for sure a great activity for the city of Barcelona, but we should find a social, economic, and environmental balance. Public and private sectors should work towards that goal to preserve all the aspects of the sustainability. In a world where social media and life make us believe that there is no time to reflect and that everything can be summarized in a yes or not, we should have just a pause to think and to find first solutions to keep the benefits of the cruise industry. And I am sure we can achieve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Perez, for your intervention and your point of view. Now I invite Mr. Hugo Metsola, Director General the Cruise Line International Association Europe. He joins CLEA from a Royal Caribbean Group, where he has served as a Vice President for Government Relations in Europe and Asia Pacific since 2016. During his previous political career, he held senior position in the Finnish Parliament and in the Finnish Prime Minister's office. He is a graduate of the University of Helsinki and the Harvard Kennedy School, where he studied with the Fulbright Scholarship. Thank you, Mr. Metsola, for your participation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katerina. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having invited me to give the perspective of the cruise lines. CLEA is the global trade association for ocean-going cruise ships. We represent over 90% of the passenger volume globally. So we can pretty much say that there's one industry, one voice represented by CLEA. Indeed, I was seconded from Royal Caribbean Group to be the Director General of CLEA in Europe to navigate us through this pandemic crisis. But just for the sake of full transparency, as many good things, including my secondment, it will come to an end at the end of this year. So I will be returning to Royal Caribbean actually just this week. When I joined CLEA, I realized that we need to prioritize, and we set up just two overarching priorities. First is this gradual healthy return to service, and second one is everything that falls under sustainability and EU Green Deal. Both topics have already been touched upon, but I will split my time, the remaining 6 or so minutes, on these two main topics. So the entire CLEA membership voluntarily suspended all cruise operations on 13th March 2020. And that was immediately followed by months of repatriation crisis, because we had to get first our passengers, but then also our crew members back to their home countries in a situation where most borders were simply closed. And unlike in most European countries, there are other countries, let's say in Asia, where there is no automatic right of returning to your home country no matter what. So we really had to spend many, many months in getting our employees home. But already at that time, the cruise lines understood that the pandemic is going to be with us for quite some time. And we had to invest into the world's leading medical and scientific advice to come up with new health protocols, which many previous speakers already referred to. And that eventually led into the adoption of CLEA member policy to mitigate the risk of COVID-19, which was adopted December last year, almost exactly 1 year ago. And we can now fairly safely say that these protocols work. They do deliver the intended results. And of course, we know this only because we have been able to test them empirically. And here I want to go back to what Pino was saying earlier. It was, of course, very necessary that ports like Civitavecchia and others allowed cruise operations to resume, because a few months thereafter we could go to other European member states and say that, see, we have already carried hundreds of thousands of passengers, having these 74 different measures in place to mitigate the risk of spread of COVID. So why are you still maintaining a legal ban on international cruise calls? And slowly, a sort of a positive domino effect started to take place earlier this year. It was really much led after Italy, countries like Greece, which was very helpful. Thereafter, Croatia, France, eventually also Spain, Portugal, and all the way up to Norway, which was among the latest countries which overturned the cruise ban in August. So we did kind of lead this resumption effort in Europe. And indeed, by the end of this year, CLEA estimates that approximately 80% of our fleet will be in operation, although much of that has, of course, now shifted to North America or the Caribbean market due to the normal seasonal variance in cruise ship deployment. And all in all, it has gone well. Passenger volumes have been down, but just like was said, we look into 2022 with great optimism. Our passengers clearly understand why these protocols are in place, and they appreciate the fact that we really put their safety and our employees' safety and the safety of the ports and destinations that we visit at the top priority. And I just have to say one final word, that of course the industry came up with its own protocols, but then many member states wanted to look into them and they made certain modifications. And part of the problem we currently have is that a cruise ship may sail from Spain to France to Italy, maybe even Greece and back. And the rules vary depending, for instance, where you may be flagged. So there's an Italian national cruise protocol which still maintains and requires the shoreside bubble so that there is no interaction between cruise passengers and local population, which then the Greek ports do not like. They are protesting against the cruise lines that why do not allow the free flow of fully vaccinated people, for instance. Well, in some cases, we are under legal obligation to maintain that bubble. Also in the Spanish protocol, because this is a Barcelona event, I can highlight that you have a very specific additional requirement going above and beyond the EU healthy gateways, which is a mandatory testing on the last day of sailing. And if we think about having large number of people on board, which are already pre-tested, if they are fully vaccinated and they are tested once more in the middle of the voyage, is it really absolutely necessary to test them again on the day of disembarkation? So these are the sort of things we are having regular conversations with various government authorities, just giving them data and information to increase everybody's comfort level, that we can really grow and return to service big way in 2022 without posing any health risks to anyone. In interest of time, I will just quickly move to the Green Deal. I will be brief. I just want to remind everybody that our members at the highest levels at the Global Executive Committee of CLEA have clearly decided that our vision is to pursue net carbon neutral cruising in Europe by 2050. We therefore agree with the long-term political objectives of EU. We need to decarbonize, the entire continent wants to decarbonize, and we can take the lead in this necessary green transition. Because again, like Pino was referring to, many people forget that if you look at the commercial order book of European major shipyards, not only Fincantieri, but also Chantiers de Atlantique in France or Meyerwerft in Germany and Finland, roughly 80% of their business, of their commercial order book, is actually cruise ships. So if our industry is not at the heart of the greening of the European maritime waterborne sector, then how will we possibly take the lead in this green transition? If we don't manage to do this together with the help of European member states and the Commission as part of this Green Deal, the likely scenario is that eventually also cruise ship building would migrate into other parts of the world. Cruise industry would survive, but our centuries-old industrial maritime cluster could be at risk. But the good news is that we are working very well with these yards, that some of our members have recently announced cutting-edge new technologies such as generating 4 megawatts of power through hydrogen fuel technology, which is one of the methods through which cruise ships in the future can reach that zero emissions requirement should European Commission's legislative proposal be adopted. But of course, I think for all the ports in the audience today, the shore power is sort of vital. And my message to the ports is that our members, I mean, cruise lines are very ready already. More than half of the new ships are already equipped with shore power capacity. About 37% of the overall fleet is ready. And even much of the rest is built in a way that shore power capacity can be retrofitted during a dry dock. And the only thing why that is not happening 100% is basically that shore power is not available in European ports. We have like 5 ports where we can plug in, but you don't have to worry about cruise ships not being ready. By the time the ports are ready, the ships will be ready. But of course, as I mentioned, there may be other ways for us also to reach the compliance, such as alternative marine fuels, so battery packs, etc., etc. The point here is that nobody should question our industry's total determination to find a pathway to become fully sustainable, because we understand that this is a business critical issue. We will, over decades, lose our license to operate in Europe unless we really walk our talk. But in this context, I think that the cruise industry and the European maritime sector also deserves a fair chance to make progress in this pathway. And of course, the economic reality is that our industry has lost tens of billions. And now with the Fit for 55 proposal, there are quite radical and fast approaching efforts to increase the cost of deploying cruise ships in Europe through the carbon pricing. Again, we don't disagree with the long-term objectives, but I think that we should talk about reasonable implementation timelines and perhaps modify the Commission's proposal in some technical aspects. But the time doesn't allow me to cover all those details, but very happy to take any questions and dig deeper into this, should it be of any interest. I think my time is up. So thank you very much for your attention, and back to you, Katerina.
Thank you a lot, Mr. Metsola, for your perspective. And now I invite the last panelist, Mr. Dimitris Lemonakis. I would like to remember to all the participants that after the end of the panel, we will have a question and answer session. So feel free to write in the chat session all your questions so that I can do them to the speakers. And so I invite Mr. Dimitris Lemonakis, Administrative Council Member of Perez Chamber of Commerce and Industry, President for the Department of Services and the Delegate Member to the Union of the Hellenic Chambers of Commerce, General Assembly and the Chamber's Regional Council of Attica. He sits at the Board of Directors of the Lavrion Port Authority as an independent, not executive director, and at the Board of Directors for the Hellenic Chambers Transport Association. He is also CEO for a private firm, Kedros SA, and has extensive experience in leadership and project management. Thank you, Mr. Lemonakis, for your participation. Please activate your microphone.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, now yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Katerina, for hosting this esteemed panel. It's always a pleasure to be joining Medatalk and our dear colleagues across the Mediterranean. I would like to briefly present a Greek perspective and a chamber perspective to the discussion today. Starting first of all, the Mediterranean has always been and remains a top cruise destination. This year's cruise season is now ending after the waves of the pandemic, which indeed have tortured the whole sector. It is worth recalling the leading role played, of course, by Mediterranean stakeholders, including Greece, in restarting the cruise industry. According to information that has come to light, at least 28 cruise ships of CLEA member companies have sailed in Greek waters, 21 of those of which have used Greek ports for home porting. Now, with almost 30 million tourists at pre-pandemic levels, Greece is one of the most popular tourist countries in the world and is leading with a leading role in the restart of tourism and cruising this year. This has strengthened the country's profile and boosted interest in, I would say, the cruise companies in home porting as well. Now, Greece, Italy, Turkey, for example, are also competing in an effort to increase the number of cruise ships that their ports will use for home port, as well as the number of companies that will launch ships to a number of popular destinations. Piraeus Port Authority estimates show us that according to the pre-bookings of the 2022 year, more than 700 cruise ships are expected to arrive in port, more than 60% of which concern home porting for Piraeus. Also, it should be noted that in 2019, and that is before the pandemic, 622 cruise ships were served. So there is an obvious dynamic to restart the cruise. Since a recovery rate of approximately 60% has been achieved in 2021, comparing to 2020, which was, of course, a year with an immense decrease in servicing, we are expecting that next year will be at a very stable pace and situation. Also, new arrivals are expected for the port of Piraeus. We have examples of Virgin Cruises, Ritz-Carlton Yacht Collection. So it can be highlighted that approximately, what we can see, approximately 60% of these arrivals shall regard home port. And this is both a positive contribution for the local economy, but also for the regional economy. Of course, the Mediterranean hides, I would say, multiple perspectives and options for cruise companies that operate their ships either in the Eastern Mediterranean or in the Western Mediterranean shores, with Italy and Malta situated in the center of the theater of cruise routes. Typical example of inexhaustible proposals is the fact that companies choose to approach Greece, Turkey, Egypt, and Israel, combining three continents in circular voyages, where alterations of cultural elements, gastronomy, archaeological treasures, and sceneries are indeed unique. The Mediterranean cruise has open horizons, and of course it navigates in an area with dynamic and distinctive features, all available with destinations of a Mare Nostrum dedicated to the cruise industry. At this point, it can also be noted that geometrically, the increasing popularity of the Mediterranean destinations also hinders dangers such as hypertourism. That is a phenomena such as those observed in popular locations in the Adriatic coastline, but also in our case, in islands such as Santorini, largely due to the mass arrivals of cruise ships with increased passenger capacity. We should preserve the tourist product, local color, senses, but also help develop a sustainable future through a relationship of mutual benefit for local communities and their economy, passengers, and of course the companies that manage cruise ship fleets. Now, the discussion about setting a holistic approach to nurture a phenomenon where the use of statistics can lead to formatting business proposals and reprogramming approaches have and require time to evolve. We should not forget that the cruise industry is a whole community, and as such, it does not consist only of cruise companies. Therefore, in order for the industry to function properly, synergies and collaborations with port authorities, governments, regional and local authorities, stakeholders and agencies, and especially during a pandemic period with health authorities, are of paramount importance. Piraeus CCI has supported and continues to support the development of cruise synergies. These synergies in the fields of shipbuilding repairs and catering supplies are currently very important for the local ecosystem of the wider Piraeus area. For instance, the revitalization of the shipbuilding units at the Gulf of Velefsis currently undertaken will provide Piraeus in Greece another positive element for the support of primarily shipping activity of cruise ships in the Eastern Mediterranean, perhaps beyond. Looking into the effects of the pandemic and the recovery, as my presentation is coming to an end, I would like to stress that the cruise industry has suffered indeed a lot during the first period of the pandemic last year, and cruise ships were found mostly, approximately 90% of those, inactive in various situations, lay up in ports or shipyards, in anchorages, drifting, even traveling to a destination called nowhere with minimal speed, awaiting for orders and with reduced crews at the limit of the composition set by the IMO. From the cruise ship fleet, 24 units were taken to scraps, with those, for instance, reaching Turkey, keeping the lion's share. The dismantling of the cruise ships opened a very interesting secondary market in Turkey for used items, for accommodation, leisure facilities that were demolished by ships before the use of shipbuilding metal. Also, more than 32 ships were transferred to other investors, with floating hotel planning ideas evolving. However, such alternatives did not work out entirely, as measures to tame the pandemic effectively canceled such choices, and problems focused, for example, on issues such as ventilation systems for those new hotels. Looking at the pandemic and the torment it has caused in the Mediterranean cruise industry at a time with almost all of the companies operating ships towards a number of destinations, well, what we have seen is that the companies have designed and announced programs mostly with a 5-year horizon, which is the usual for implementing programs. Now today, and going through the pandemic as it also evolves and we evolve with it, the new conditions imposed by it and due to the protocols in force, many of these programs have had to be revised, particularly if you take into account disembarkation as well as excursions, as these are handled with a totally new approach. Now, my colleagues before mentioned different situations varying from country to country as well. So this feature has dramatically changed how the programs are now offered. However, coming to an end, the fact so far justifies I would say, a small note for optimism for Mediterranean cruising. Its popularity remains strong, with bookings showing that this market will recover faster than others. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lemonakis, also for your perspective and for sharing it with us. Now, I will give you just few questions to know a little bit more about your point of view, and you can raise your hand or activate your microphone to answer. And yes, let's start from the first question. We know that every situation specific the pandemic one sure creates a lot of challenges for the sector that you all have explained us this afternoon. But what do you think could be the opportunities for the cruise industry after this situation? Yes, Mr. Lemonakis, you have activated the microphone. You would like to start?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't deactivate it.
Okay, no problem, no problem.
I think Uko would like to start.
Yes, I have seen that. Yes, thank you.
Well, as fellow panelists already implied, the demand signal for our products is very strong. So there's clear evidence of this pent up demand, as they say. People have not been able to travel with their families for quite some time, and bookings are strong. And all surveys that we have done across various markets globally indicate that consumers understand our protocols and have no problems with them. There's a tiny percentage of people surveyed globally who would, for instance, never take a vaccination and would never cruise if that was a requirement and whatever, but it's a really marginal phenomenon. And different brands will do their own decisions regarding full vaccination or not full vaccination. But in any case, I would suspect that most cruise ships by next season will be nearly fully vaccinated population. Of course, it depends a little bit on how many children there will be on board, and that varies from one brand to another. And it may take some time before we get younger children vaccinated, but all of that is progressing, and that is ultimately the key solution. We may, in many countries in Europe, at this point, be witnessing some sort of a fourth wave. Numbers, unfortunately, are up again in many, many countries. But even if this winter repeats itself from last winter, I think we can be pretty optimistic that that wave will be gone way before the traditional start of the European summer season 2022. And with the increasing vaccination and the booster shots, I think that people are just ready to go out there and sail. And I think also the countries and ports have understood that cruising is actually economically quite important for many remote coastal communities and islands that depend heavily on cruising. So I think we will hear less of this argument that cruise industry doesn't leave an economic impact. It's a popular statement by some people who do not like cruising. They tend to say that, yeah, they only come and buy a coffee cup and there's no economic impact. And I think it is now better understood that when it comes to the port fees and the whole supply chain, etc., if you look at the holistic economic impact, it is actually quite significant. And after a couple of pretty terrible years where passenger volumes were indeed down by some 90%, also most of the ports and destinations are welcoming us back with sort of open arms. Of course, we want to operate in a harmonious way with the ports and destinations, and there is still a lot of work to be done in the area of sort of social sustainability, but we are moving forward in all fronts. And I think that this crisis really brought the cruise industry together because we cooperated in a way we would have never cooperated in the past. Different cruise lines compete fiercely against each other, but this was such an existential crisis that now that we face the EU Green Deal, I think there's a stronger sense that this industry can and should be working together, which is another reason for optimism. And it is not just CLEA and CLEA's members, it is associations like MedCruise. I failed to recognize President Ayan's great efforts in opening the sailings between Greece and Turkey, where we work together with CLEA. So I think this wider community is readier to work together, and I have probably listed 4 or 5 reasons for optimism already. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you a lot, and I agree with you. The cooperation sure will be at the basis, and sure after this situation, the different entities will be more united, you know, to face the new years, the following years. I think that there will be nobody that would like to intervene. So yes, okay. So Mrs. Yes, please, thank you.
Thank you very much, Uko, for the comment, which was a positive note. And I would like to add that I think that the governments have also realized when the cruise lines have retracted and we went to zero call situation, they really realized the positive impact of the cruise industry in their cities. And the cooperation that we have flourished between cruise lines, ports, associations has also extended also to the governments too. And it was really valuable. That's what we have really tremendously seen when actually on a governmental level, the Greek governments were really proactive. Same goes for actually the Turkish government as well. They really realized how important the cruise industry was for the country, beside actually the tourism industry. So thank you very much for raising it, and I think that it helped us, and it showed us how, yes, we were resilient, but how we embraced each other to get through these tough days, and I think that it will continue on this trend.
Thank you a lot. Thank you. Now, yes, Mr. Dimitris, I have seen that you have raised your hand, right?
It is only a brief comment, and I think that accordingly, there is a saying, we wish for wind on your sails. But, you know, in order to get to that point, there is an element of feeling safe that we need to enhance a bit more in the years to come, particularly 2022. And I would give you also another point of reference that it is important to secure that the comparison and the linkage with airfare is also taken into consideration. We need a higher degree of air travel to be made available next year. And this will also reinforce the position of cruise ships and how they will be receiving embarking and disembarking passengers. And it is also going to become a focal point for some of the islands, some of our island destinations within the Mediterranean. So reinforcing the cruise ship itineraries will have a relevance, also looking into the aviation sector and how strong that will come through in 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Dimitris, for your comments that allow me to do a direct connection with the second answer. So sure, as you told, it's important, the communication regarding the safety measurements. And as also Mr. Metsola told before, there are also different legal rules that change country by country. So which are, from your point of view, the best practices to ensure and communicate also to the passengers? Because there is also maybe a little bit of confusion because the measure changes country by country in your sector, so in the cruise sector. Yes, Mr. Metsola, thank you.
Well, you know, the empirical evidence shows that our health protocols deliver the intended results. So I think that on the health front, especially those who have cruised before, understand everything well. I think the industry has a lot of work to be done in relation to new to cruise, which may not fully understand how we have actually thought through different scenarios. And my sense is that there is still this lingering sentiment among some potential cruisers that you might be stuck on a ship somewhere if it's quarantined, and then we don't get home and life gets significantly disrupted. And of course, the roots of that are in the problems some of our member lines did have in the very early stages of this pandemic, when the governments just closed their borders. So of course, we did have those famous challenges, for instance, in Japan, where nobody knew how to best handle a situation with the new mysterious virus. But now, of course, we have agreements with ports and destinations and governments that if the continuous testing brings up cases, how we isolate them, how we disembark them, so that nobody needs to be stuck. And we have had cases on board our ships, but there's been a sort of handful of them, typically less than you would have on the shore side, given that we sail with the bubble concept with 100% tested people. So we haven't had any major outbreaks. And I think that we need to make sure that people understand that there is no real risk of some ship being stranded and then you being several weeks somewhere outside the port, because now we know so much more about how this pandemic and this particular virus needs to be dealt with. But I think that there is still more we need to do to communicate that to everybody, because there are potentially misconceptions around it. Second, very brief comment relates to travel rules with different kids. So if we now have the COVID certificate and people, at least in the Schengen area, who have a COVID vaccine certificate can move relatively freely, different countries again have different rules regarding how those requirements are applied to children and which age children. So I experienced this big time because I happen to have 4 children who are 14, 13, 9, and 4. And traveling in the Mediterranean was rather complicated because even between Malta and Sicily or wherever we went, the rules seemed to change, and there was PCR test for the 9-year-old, etc., etc., etc. Without elaborating on the details, the point is that for sort of family brands with kids of varying ages going from one European country to another was quite stressful during 2021. And I just hope that the governments will take steps so that they also come up with something a little bit more coherent, so that people don't have to stress with the different types of PLF forms and this forever, because traveling today is just more cumbersome than it needs to be. And I think that we need to work pretty hard with the government so that they also understand that if they want to boost tourism, which is so important for the Mediterranean economy, we also need to take reasonable steps in facilitating traveling from one country to another. And there's a lot of work to be done in that space. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Mr. Metsola, for your comments. Yes, there is somebody else that would like to answer. Not okay. So I would like to thank you all for your participation and for your points of view from different countries, from different areas that were very interesting. And I would like also to thank again Ascame for the organization of this Medatalk, and to all the participants that were connected with us today. Thank you a lot for all. Bye. See you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Safe travels to all of you. Take care.
Thank you very much, Dimitris. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.